Hi, it's Martin from Martin's Engine Services. It's time for part two of building the 1.4 GM Vauxhall stock car engine. Please excuse any chainsawing noise in the background. It's not my neighbour, but the guy the other side. Um, Sounds like they're having a major clear up or something. Anyhow, as I mentioned at the end of the last video, I needed to gap the piston rings, which I've done so. They weren't actually as bad as I thought. I squared them up in the bore using the piston upside down and only need a small amount taken off. So, mind you, interesting to note, there's actually two different batches of rings. There's three from an earlier batch, and the one I got actually out to test initially was from a later batch, and the other three were almost perfect. So, same part number, same size ring, everything correct, but just a slight variation in their length. So, just something I thought was quite interesting to note. I fitted cylinders 1 and 4 in already. Save you it's not the most exciting thing fitting pistons. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. They've got an arrow on the top points forward. Very easy to work that out. The original pistons and conrods in all these GM engines, or most manufacturers, come in a variety of sizes and weights, and they're graded accordingly. And GM stamp their sizes here, so you've got 0, 0, 0, 0. Means all these pistons and rods are all exactly the same size and weight. And likewise, they stamp the original main bearing classification on, and see as all bar one, only one there was slightly different. So it must have been a very good tolerance engine from new. I've got one more piston clamped up here, ready to fit. And these type of connecting rods on these are where they actually cast them and they crack the caps off, so you leave this rough finish. So you can't get the cap on A, the wrong way round, and B, on the wrong rod. Wrong rod, that's it. So I was saying earlier about different tags and locating tags on bearings. Here, this one you see is cut for 2 options, and they propped it up there. And likewise, these bearings do actually have an oil hole in, but this conrod doesn't use an oil squirter. Oh, get in the line of the camera, mine. There's no hole here for oil squirter to cool the piston, so it's just redundant. So I think these bearings actually fitted like the old 13S and 16N, VNZ, all the rest of it. And it wasn't uncommon to actually get a set of these shells where the tag was on the wrong side, and the conrod didn't have the double cutout, so you'd actually have to file that, and sometimes you had to drill an additional oil hole, because you'd put it in where the tag was, but the oil hole would be over this side. So it wasn't uncommon to have to drill an extra oil hole, because no matter what the orientation, you could never get the things to line up. There was one thing you had to watch, say, a lot with the older GM engines. There was a lot of variations and sort of mysteries in the bottom there. And so I'll get ready to put this piston down the hole. This old piston ring clamp here, I was just thinking to myself, is actually 40... Ooh, it's coming up 40 years old now. My granddad bought this for me for my birthday. Yeah, it's 39 years old. And I remember the first engine we put together with this was a Triumph Dolomite 1500. There's an engine no one's seen for a while. Prior to that, we had one of those sort of pulled together band type ones, more like an oil filter strap, but he bought this, and I've still got the original box that it came in from my Snap-on dealer. There is the original box, and written on the side there, just about legible, is Happy Birthday Martin from Grandad, December 30th, 1986. How about that? Lovely little bit of family history, and as you can see, she's built a few engines. In fact, he's built hundreds and hundreds of engines. So, quite proud of that whole thing. Simple little tools you get attached to that have got a special memory. Yeah, I think that Dolomite gives me some special memories, but not in a good way. Anyhow, what I've always do is I always set the crankshaft on the cylinder I'm going to fit at bottom dead centre, so you can drop the rod straight in. It's nice and easy. I always fit 1 and 4 first, it saves messing around turning everything. Got the bearing shell sat in here, got the piston rings orientated. Obviously you want to put the end gaps away from each other, Problem is the oil control ring is a 3-part, so you can stagger the 3 joins in that, and then I just oppose the other 2, just to give the user the best chance of sealing. And you can't avoid having 1 or 2 of the gaps in the oil ring near the gap in the second ring, but you just do your best you can with that one. So I'll put the camera back in the stand, and then we'll proceed to stick a couple of pistons down the holes. Right, find the oil can, we've lost it again. Always make sure you thoroughly oil the little ends, because these actually run directly in the piston, gives it the best chance on start up. This is cylinder number 2. Plenty of oil down the bore, but knock the piston off. This will initially give you the sensation once you put it all together, there's hardly any resistance on the rings, but it will soon come off and they start to bite. I'd rather have them well lubed up on assembly. And this engine's probably going to sit for some time in a spare, so I'm going to make sure everything's well protected. Arrow to the front. I remember when I did this on an old Ford Classic engine for a friend of mine, and he'd never seen this done, and I got this big hammer out to start tapping the piston down the bore, and the look on his face was a picture. He just spent the vast amount of money getting it rebuilt. He was quite mortified to think I was going to beat it in, but I'd explained to him, you tap it gently, you don't beat it in. If it doesn't want to go in, stop, because there's going to be a reason. So that's that one gone in. You see it went down there quite easy, but no matter, just drop a bit of oil on the journal. It might smoke a bit when you start it up, but it's a vauxhall engine and they're going to smoke at some point anyhow. You can't really seat these bearings wrong in this type of this caps, because, well, so you can't really seat them wrong because obviously you've got the location tag. You just got to sit them in there. Some stick up above, some below, because of the way they've broken the cap off. But it seems to be a very good idea, and it does provide very positive locations. There's no possibility when you talk the cap up of any movement. It's positive and it seems to work very well. First time you come across it, it all seems a little bizarre, but hey, it seems to work very well. Before clamping the piston up, always make sure you've thoroughly oiled it again, and then set the rings. I'll just put them opposed. Right, just going to clamp this one up and tap it in. Right, all ready to go in. All on the big end. Right. Cover it in oil. Where's the arrow? Hold on, folks. Technical problem. Right, there's the arrow. Right, there we go. Nice, simple. All engines number 1 to 4 to the back, unless of course you have some of the older French engines. Well, number 1 was actually at the flywheel end and labelled that way. Although to make it more confusing, number 1 was at the back, but the arrows on the piston still pointed forward to the front of the engine. So that was a very French thing, or mostly Renault thing actually, which could catch you out, especially when you're trying to work out the firing order or something. Right, spin her over. Function. Grab the corresponding bearing cap, pop the shell into place, bolts out easier. You can tap these down, but I mean it doesn't really do a lot because the surfaces are, so just rough finish. Bit more oil for luck, down the oil hole. Around nicely, tags together, tags together. One more bearing shell, got worried there for a minute, couldn't find it. Oil everywhere. Tags together. All on the bolt. It's not so bad when you're doing a 4-cylinder engine, getting the conrod orientation, the caps and all the rest of it right. If you're doing a V engine, it can get very confusing when you flip the engine over and you've got pistons and rods coming in from various angles. And you could get very, very easily confused. What I like to do once I've just nipped these down is again, get the mallet, just give them a little tap, and then make sure you've got side to side movement. You can hear that rod just moving, and you want that play to be there. Otherwise, now she's gone tight. I've already checked these ones and they are moving fine. This is very, very important, because if there's something tight there, or the rod's loading up or out of line or whatever, and it will side load the rods, side load the bearings, it can do harm to the pistons and the little ends. So it's absolutely imperative you make sure you do have some rod free play, because obviously the rod and the crank will expand with the heat, take up. Now when I stripped this engine, there was no side play because the carbonated oil had literal carbonated. The carboned up oil had actually built up on these shoulders and against the rods, and they were literally stuck because the caps are actually stuck on the crank when I undid it. So just shows you what can actually happen. So they're all nice. I'll turn it over now. There we go. Check that one. Just swash out some of the oil. It's moving nicely. Right, they're all moving nicely. So now it's time to torque and angle those up. I thought proceedings while I do that, because it's not the most exciting thing to watch. Right, that's those all in and done. That's the my trusty old angle tool gauge. Pretty ancient old thing, but you set the socket on the top, put the bar against something, set it on 0, turn the middle and read it off. It's worked well for many years, but I know there's much more improved ways and tool wrenches that are built in, but I find that does the job. So it's all gone up nicely. They've all got a nice bit of wiggle. It all turns over nicely, and as the oil starts to pull off the balls, what it would do if you had an ultra fan of mine. So as the oil starts to come off the bores, the rings start to bite. You can hear them actually biting now. You can see the oil squishing out, so we're all happy with that. Just a piece of mind. I'll give one more tap. I think we can call that success. Lovely. There we go. Slurps the tea. So that is basically the whole of the rotating assembly in. I didn't mark these because I did them in order that way. Then I came back over them with the tool wrench and then came back on with the angle. So they're pretty good. all nice, all them are lined up. A little clue you've got them all right is all the caps do have a little notch pointing whichever way they point. Obviously it's the back, all the arrows should be the front, all the tags are on the same side, but always double check. Arrow, 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 arrow. That's good. No problem with that at all. So that completes the basic short block. So now it's time to fit the oil pickup pipe and then move on to the sump. I always like to have one good look, see if anything else that you can think of, anything you're not happy with. That's all lined up, that's tight, double checked. Just have a good visual, make sure you're happy with everything. If there's anything you're not happy with, go back, check it, do it again. Don't presume it's done. So I've just got to go and grab the oil pickup pipe and O-ring and I'll be back in a moment. Right, oil pickup pipe. Always use a new O-ring. I know it's very obvious, but sometimes the old O-ring may appear good, but they go very hard with the heat. So for the sake of a few pence, change it. Very important to note with these as well, there are two different lengths of bolt. There are two longer bolts that go into the block or into the pump, and a short one into the block for the support bracket. If you put the long one in here, it won't tighten this bracket up fully, and this one here only goes in by one turn of thread. Of course, what could happen is that can vibrate and could literally pull the bolt out, tip the pickup, and it's goodbye engine. In fact, I think I mentioned it on the last one of these I did. That's exactly what happened. It had a replacement oil pump. Somebody actually mixed up those bolts. I think they were rather lucky. Just make sure that's going down nice and square. The bracket doesn't move along, so you don't want to put any undue strain on it. There's always the risk of cracking something. So knit this bolt up just to centralise the bracket. Again, these aren't tooled up to very high numbers at all. And again, are nowhere near as tight as you actually think. They're only small M6 standard. I think they're 8.8, yeah, 8.8 specification bolts going into aluminium, so that is all they need. All amusing me with people with the torque wrench, they go click and then a bit further, then come back and say, oh, it's perfectly well torqued. Well, yes, it's now 3 times as tight as it needs to be. Of course the torque wrench clicking. It's only ever cracked once. Right, there we go. I will go back and double check carefully because sometimes some bolts and things can settle, but you don't want to go past. Right, now that includes all that. This is the bit where I like to stand for a while and just have a little think and a little ponder. Up and torqued, guide in mind, up and torqued and angled, 1, 2, 3, 4. We know they're good. We know all the spots are there. Seals in, silicon's in. It's all sitting there nicely. There's nothing else needs to go in. This hole I'm going to block off with a machine upper plug or use the old sensor. That's just for the old timing sensor. We don't need that. There's a breather around the back. It's all external. So there's nothing else needs to go on the bottom of this engine. It now purely is time to get the sump siliconed up and ready to bolt on. So I'll get the sump all prepared. I'll get all the silicone around it or Permatex around it, and I'll bring you back when it's time to put it on. Right, the sump's all prepared. Anybody who's paying attention will notice I've removed all the paint around there, wiped it down with cellulose paint thinners, and the sump has also been cleaned. Excuse me, has also been cleaned. So the windage tray or flash plate, whatever, has been bolted up and torqued, and these have been Loctited. When you put silicone around these sumps, there's a little tiny groove there. You bias it, or say Permatex, you bias it to the outward edge of the little groove. So as you bolt it up, it squashes into the groove and out that way. You do not put heaps around the inside, otherwise it will obviously go in and you run the risk of beads of it going up the oil pickup. When you buy a tube of silicone or Permatex for doing this, remember you don't have to use the whole tube. Some people seem to think put it on 6mm on that wide must be better. The only place I put a little extra on these is just around there, because for some reason that has been known to be a prone area. So let's get it down on there. Without. Now you want to get it down there as accurately as possible. Lovely. Now on the older GM engines, when you used to have a gasket, some had a cork gasket. There were some of the old, I think it was the old 2 litre red top, 20XE engine or C20XE, I can't remember what it was. Used to actually have a gasket, then a windage tray, then a gasket, and then the sump. And I can't have to tell you what sort of fun that was to stop them leaking and get them lined up. So basically it just didn't work. The original sump gaskets were actually cork, which of course just used to swash out. The later ones went to rubber type, and then they incorporated the gasket into the windage tray. And finally I decided just to stick it on like this. This is the only method that seems to work. Because these old GM engines, they do like to leak oil, and we'll just do it for fun. I think I said in an earlier video, the only way to stop these leaking is if you could weld aluminium to iron, and that would stop it. But I'm sure it'd find somewhere to leak from. It always humours me when they do that. It's just one of those things. Sounds like my neighbours or the other neighbours having some real fun at the moment. There's been lots of that shouting, left up, left a bit, down a bit with some sort of digger, and I've been waiting for the inevitable crunch followed by all the swearing, but so far it hasn't happened. Now, a very, very important part of fitting these sump pans is just to nip up a couple of bolts here, and then you have got to check that the pan is absolutely square to the back of the block, because the transmission bolts through the sump here in 3 places. Now if you don't get that right, you bolt it up, you will crack the sump through here. Now this is a must-do procedure. What I always favour doing is just getting a steel rule, running it from the machine face block. That side's perfect, and that side's just a little bit out, so we just want to skew the sump round a touch there. Perfect. Perfect. Just very carefully nip the bolts, because it may escape again as the bolt tightens down. Just pick any form will do. And then check it again to make sure you're absolutely fine. It's pretty good. Just move the tiny bit. Yep, we're good to go. Again, these bolts aren't very tight. They only go into the block by, as you probably saw, about 3 or 4 turns of thread. And of course, being metal to metal, there's no give like there would be with a gasket or anything. So once they're down, and that's it. You've got to be very careful of the ones into the oil pump here, because it's very easy to strip this out. It's not uncommon for these to tear this one out particularly. And I usually just rethread it the next size up, which is M7. In fact, that one, no, it's okay. I'll go M7 and you can go M8 if you need to. You can even put a nut on the top if necessary, it's not a problem. It doesn't interfere with the timing belt cover or anything, so there's no need to go crazy and put the helical in or a time cert or something. Right, one more quick check before things are starting to go off. Yep. We're good. Right, let's go around them all again. Here we go, one sump pan. And most importantly, of course, put the sump plug in. And where have we put that? I've already replaced the washer on that, it's just another simple O-ring. This is one of those things where people forget to tighten them up and they've overhauled something. It's going to lead obviously to disaster, so it's one of those simple things, but don't forget. And again, this is not a cylinder head bolt, it's a metal to metal with an O-ring trapped in it. Now, because it's metal to metal, if you tighten it up too much, the steel will dig into the alley and will gall it and you won't get that out. And this is actually done up to the same torque as the sump, which is not a great deal. The seal's already, it just moved a little bit, so that's it. Right, here we go. The fundamentals of the bottom end. One item I must just put in while it's there, it's the oil pressure switch. Oh, good grief. I've just had a huge crunch of a tree or something going down from the neighbours, but there's no shouting yet, so that could make quite an exciting video if something's badly going wrong. Now this oil pressure switch here, they don't actually run an oil pressure light in the vehicle at the moment, but this is obviously crimped together. You've got the passageway in here and there's a diaphragm, and the diaphragm comes up and makes and breaks the connection. Now the one in the other engine I repaired the head on had actually been broken off here, leaving the inside part. Now the inside part was actually the diaphragm. Unfortunately, it hadn't shot out under oil pressure. There was the possibility that it would have blown out and then emptied the entire sump of oil. So I nicked the one out of this for his engine and put a nice new shiny one for this. In fact, this is an original GMAC Delco one, so it's quite good. In fact, I think this engine might win the show and shine competition, looking at it. Right, let's tighten that up. Don't be alarmed at the huge socket I'm using, it just happens to clear the sensor. I'm not going to attack it with the air gun. It looks quite impressive though. Right, that's that in place. So now we can roll her up the right way and put a few other bits and pieces on. It's getting heavy now. These are quite a substantially heavy engine compared to the Ford Z-Tech I'm doing, or the Z-Tech SE. there. So put the oil filter on, cover that up. The breather here at the back of the block. The original breather runs up to the cam cover. We just use this fitting here and then run a pipe to a separate catch tank, because obviously these do breathe hard with the oil sloshing around, so that's a good solution to that. So I'll just get that on and then I'll probably move on to the front end. Right, time for the water pump. And the one I took out this engine had completely corroded away. Not to beat it out, but it wasn't that bad. Remember the old, well, this still does do the same thing, the eccentrically mounted water pumps, and you had to adjust these to adjust the timing belt tension. And they used to confidently say in the workshop manual, undo the 3 bolts and turn the water pump. I think I've still got the funny bent spanners, but reality was take it out, change the O-ring, grease it up. I always use a bit of red rubber grease on these because it won't affect the O-ring like mineral grease can. These don't need to be adjusted, but they do need to be set in a specific position for assembly. And there should be a notch in the block here which lines up with this, and the impeller should be in line with the outlet here. Now if there isn't a notch or it's weak, mark it, because if you get it too far around, the timing belt tensioner here runs out of travel in either direction. You won't get the belt tension correct. So I always put a new mark there and go by that. Now also oil the bolts as well, because although this will be coming apart, you know, every sort of year or so, these bolts used to corrode in something chronic. And I think to remember particularly on the 2 litre 16 valve, hello, excuse the chainsaw noise. I think there's another tree about to go flying past. Well, I do actually remember on occasion having to drill these pumps out by lowering the engine down, coming to the wheel arch and drilling a series of holes around here and smashing the castings out bit by bit to get them off. Likewise, the front pulley used to be the same. So I'm not taking any chances whatsoever. It was quite a useless idea because the pump sits on a slight taper. So you moved it out a bit, tightened the belt, did the bolts up, and of course it would put the belt tension out. It was one of those marvellous ideas they had. Some of the old Audi had that idea as well. It didn't work. Quite often you just slide a new timing belt on, particularly on the 16 SHs and the old 13Ss, put the belt on, manoeuvre the top pulley on, and it always run tight and always whine and make loads of noise, and people used to ignore it. There we go. Fine, it's not interfering with hitting the block or anything, so that's perfect. So basically, that is the bottom end built. I'm just going to put the breather on here, clean the paint off, put that on, and that is it. We're now waiting for the cylinder head, which I've got the parts for today, and I shall be putting that together, and I shall make a video about assembling the head. And yes, I will clean the paint off the top there if anybody says anything, and then we can get the head on as a final assembly, and then I can't put any, obviously, the front end on, the belt cover and all the other bits and pieces. So I think we'll leave it there for today. So I hope you enjoyed these 2 parts of assembling the engine. You get some idea what goes on and a few GM specials. I know everybody's got their own way of doing this, but that's the way I like to do it. I like to follow an assembly procedure, go along bits and pieces. And I will now, of course, be filling this up. I won't need to rotate the engine anymore, you understand. So we'll take this plug out in a minute, and we'll pour about half a litre of oil in there, then put this plug in, then it's done. And I will mark it, so I'll take the chalk off. But anything that I need to work on again, or anything I've got a concern about, or anything for the future, I always mark it with yellow so you can see it. It's just a safety thing I do. So I hope you enjoyed part 2 of this little mini series, and the other parts will be following soon. So thanks very much indeed for watching. Oh, it's alright, I'm confusing myself with the camera, ignore that. So please like and subscribe, it's much appreciated, and bye for now.